Hello, and welcome to the preview to the view from the 2020 IMF and World Bank annual meetings, which this year will be taking place virtually between the 12th and 18th of October. I'm Marie Kemplay, the Banker's Investment Banking and Capital Markets Editor, and I'm joined by Joy Macknight, the Banker's Managing Editor. Thanks for joining me, Joy.
Hi, Marie.
Clearly, it's been a very eventful year with lots of challenges for economies across the globe. How has the IMF responded to the COVID-19 pandemic?
So a one-word answer is rapidly, which has been applauded across the board. So since March, the IMF has approved about $30 billion in loans for 75 countries. It's doubled the access to its emergency facilities. It's made available more than $100 billion in precautionary financing. And it's provided about $260 million in grants to 29 of its poorest members under the Catastrophe Containment and Relief Trust. And it's also launched new tools. So it's launched the short-term liquidity line. And so, the IMF really got a lot of liquidity out the door very quickly, which is obviously what the global economy really needed. And now the IMF is preparing for an expected second phase of additional financing requests. Additionally, it's been ramping up its capacity development work and launched a policy tracker at the start of the crisis to really help countries learn from each other. And of course, all of this has been done in a remote working environment.
So certainly a lot of work that has already been done. What are expected to be the main areas of discussion during the meetings?
Debt sustainability, I think, will be one of the hottest topics at the virtual event. It's one thing to borrow money to get through the crisis, but it's another thing to come out the other side and really be able to pay back these loans. Even before the pandemic, about half of the low-income countries were at high risk of debt distress or already in debt distress. So the CCRT is addressing this, and the IMF wants to extend this measure until April 2022. However, many are expecting really a wave of debt consolidation and debt restructuring in the low-income countries. And the IMF is also preparing for this eventuality. So there are many groups campaigning around going beyond just debt consolidation and restructuring and actually talking about debt cancellation. So the meetings will also look more into the future and focus on the post-COVID recovery, as many economies are now gradually opening up. And the IMF is really pushing to come out of this crisis with a smarter, fairer, and greener economy. In addition to gender, climate, and also inequality, good governance and fighting corruptions, I think, will be other sort of hot topics at the meetings.
Yeah, and given everything that's been going on and those big themes that you mentioned, does the IMF need to change in order to remain relevant in the future, do you think?
I think there's already talk about some changes happening. And following the global financial crisis, the IMF reformed its governance and quota system with a slight change in voting weights benefiting really China. So maybe the G20 gained at that point, but at the expense of the poor, less developed nations. The US's opposition to an increase in special drawing rights, or SDRs, to expand the IMF coffers in April has definitely brought, again, this issue of governance and quotas to the fore. The next planned quota review is in 2023. However, the COVID crisis might actually speed things up. And many are calling for the IMF to operate in a truly multilateral institution and to give equal footing to all its members. So even though it may not be the debate at this year's annual meetings, I'm sure all eyes are focused on the recovery, but I think it will be one for the future.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing your views with us, Joy. I'm looking forward to seeing all of the coverage that comes out of those meetings later in the month.